Great to have you with us. Tim Kaine, well, now he's got an opponent running for re-election in 2018, ran for vice president in 2016, senator from Virginia. He'll be joining us in just one moment. This just in, EPA Chief Scott Pruitt. I mean, at what point do you just say, you know what, Scott, it's just not working out for you, right? I mean, first of all, there's no $50 hotel rooms in D.C. I mean, you should see what I pay in my little studio here, which, let's see, if I put on any more weight, I can't fit in the door. And it's unbelievable what this guy's doing. Now we find out that he tapped an aid and donors to help his wife land a job at a conservative group. I mean, talk about draining the swamp. This guy is the swamp. I mean, at some point, you just got to find somebody else in there is going to be able to cut a regulation. He has got to go. Scott Pruitt has got to go. They either have to fire him or get him to resign, but he's becoming an embarrassment as far as I'm concerned. John Fredericks Radio Network joining us now, Senator from Virginia, Democrat, Tim Kaine. Senator, great to have you with us.
Hey, John. Good morning, man.
So you have an opponent.
I do. Yeah, it's funny to be in a campaign mode and not know who your opponent is. So
I know you have an
opponent. Last night it all got clear.
You have an opponent. Now, Corey Stewart winning a little closer, like we were doing the show last night, following it, Senator, and about 9 o'clock, we were giving Nick Friedis about an 80% chance to win.
Yeah.
He had a 6,000 vote lead. He did very well in Southwest Virginia, cutting the Corey's base there, was carrying the Central, carrying the Eastern, carrying Hampton Roads. And we're like, okay, Corey's got to make 6,000 votes up in Fairfax. That's not going to happen. And he did. Plus, he beat him by 6. He made 12,000 votes up in Northern Virginia. And so now you got an opponent, and he says you're going to go through a meat grinder. It's going to be ugly, and it's going to be a vicious campaign. What do you think of those words?
Well, when he declared a year ago, John, he said it was going to be ruthless and vicious. So maybe it's getting more civil that now he's just saying it's going to be vicious. But look, I think the race is going to be a good contrast for Virginians because they're going to get to decide who they want in the Senate. Do they want ruthless and vicious, or do they want upbeat problem solver? You know, that's been my way since I was a city councilman and mayor, upbeat problem solver. And so we will contrast that, and there's plenty of contrasts on issues too. But the big one is, do you think the Senate needs more ruthless and vicious, or do you think it needs more problem solvers?
Well, you've got $17 million. Corey Stewart has $17, I think. The financial advantage, Senator, that you're going to have, I mean, you're going to probably raise $30 million in this race easy. Corey Stewart's going to raise maybe a couple million. He's not going to get money from Mitch McConnell because he protested in front of his office. He's not going to get money from the RNC because he protested in front of their office. And so basically, you know, he's down to getting money from his supporters in Virginia and maybe some outside groups, but he's not going to get any institutional dollars. So just let's talk turkey here. I mean, your financial advantage over Chairman Stewart is going to be probably one of the biggest in history.
It'll be big, but you know, I say this because I've been on the losing end of that financial advantage in a lot of races and won. And I always say, and I think you always say this, whether you're ahead or behind, is that at the end of the day, it's votes, not dollars. So I am happy. I've had a lot of support, and I've worked very hard at it. I didn't just start this year. I've worked very hard to have resources so that we can run a campaign in 134 cities and counties. The whole purpose of the resources is so I don't have to just run a campaign in a few places. It's to make sure we go everywhere. And, John, I started the year, January, out in Appalachia. The first weekend of the year, I went Farmville to Abingdon and Bristol, and then north to Stanton. It was single-degree temperatures. I went to the coldest weekend of the year. I went to the toughest part of the state in terms of the votes I'm going to get because I do want to make sure we're running the campaign everywhere, and that's what the resources to me mean. I don't have to run a regional campaign. I can really, you know, my motto is a Virginia that works for all, but that doesn't work if I'm not campaigning for the vote of every Virginian.
Senator Kaine, look, and I do appreciate that. And anybody that knows you like I do, you work hard for every vote. You're always available. You'll talk to anybody. And you do position yourself as the center of all Virginians, not just for those that agree with your positions. And I, for one, appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you've come on my show religiously for a very long time. And we thank you, sir, for that. Let's get to some issues. Let's start with the president's trip to North Korea. For a long time, Democrats have always said, let's give peace a chance. The president goes there. They have a document. Obviously, the devil's in the details, but looks like they made some progress. They're talking. That's a good thing. What is your assessment of the North Korean summit, Senator Tim Kaine?
Yeah, John, I'll start with the positive and then raise questions. The positive is you're right. It's good to talk. Dialogue guarantees nothing, but the absence of dialogue usually, means there'll be problems. So I give the president credit for that. And I think some of the members of his national security team, especially Mattis, Joe Dunford, and Tillerson before he left, I think they set these discussions up well. A problem is that they haven't had an ambassador to South Korea, although the president has just named a very qualified individual, Harry Harris, who stepped down as the head of Pacific Command to be in that role, and I'm actually going to be meeting him in my office later today. So there's the positives. Let me point out now what we ought to be worried about. The president made a concession. What did we get for it? So the concession was that we would call off war games in South Korea, and that's a little bit offensive. John, I have a friend in the Marine Corps. When they and his MOS is training foreign militaries. We train foreign militaries all the time, and the reason we do it is because the more capacity they have, the more that they deter war, and also the more capacity they have, the less likely that the U.S. has to be involved in somebody else's war. So to say we're canceling these exercises and their war games, I think they're deterrence games. And I think they're actually exercises that can keep the U.S. out of military. We hear that the president didn't tell South Korea about it, and even much of our military leadership was surprised. That's a problem. Second thing that I would be concerned about is what did we get out of that concession? The single most important first step, if there's going to be denuclearization, is for North Korea to declare what they have. All of their nuclear infrastructure, weapons, sites, and for that declaration to be verified by the international community, probably the International Atomic Energy Agency. There was no statement at all about any verification, any disclosure or verification of anything. If North Korea won't do that, then we can't trust them to denuclearize. Now, maybe that's coming, but so far as we know right now, the president gave a significant concession that both North Korea and China really liked, and we didn't get the first step that we would want out of it. So we're just going to have to see going forward, whether we do get some concessions from North Korea. But is it good that they had the meeting? I think dialogue is good, and I'm glad that they're having dialogue.
Well, Senator, we did get 3 of our hostages back, and if you just take a step back and you say, if the North Koreans said, look, we'll give your hostages back and we'll get them out of our jail, but we want you to stop for a period of time the war games, I mean, we probably would have accepted that, right?
So we did get hostages back. That's true, and one was a Virginian, so we'll comment on that. But there's no accountability yet for the brutal treatment of Otto Warmbier, the UVA student. He's from Ohio, but he was going to UVA. Right. We don't know that there was any discussion of the human rights situation or any discussion of accountability for Otto Warmbier. And we hear that there may be a move now to reduce sanctions on North Korea. That's at least being reported in some foreign media. But we haven't been read into those details yet. As you know, I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and right. I expect that we're going to have folks from the White House over fairly soon to kind of tell us what we might expect to see next. So, look, big concession that we made that apparently surprised the South Koreans and even our own military. Will we move toward that important first step? If we're talking about denuclearization, it begins with disclosure and verification of what North Korea has, and we don't know whether that's going to happen yet or not.
All right, so basically court's out, and the president has said that there'll be no relief in sanctions until he can see evidence of the denuclearization. But I agree with you. The first step is what do you have, right? That's the first step. Tell us what you have.
Yeah, we had 2 great witnesses, a Democrat and Republican witness, not from the administration, but from the kind of academic world before us in foreign relations last week. And they agreed on much, not everything, but they both were solid on that the way you know whether this is serious is the disclosure and verification. Because if they're not willing to do that, then we're not going to get very far. But, look, I'm crossing my fingers. Again, with so many Virginians in the military, we obviously should always prefer a diplomatic resolution than raising the risk of military action or war. I feel like my job in the Senate is reduce the risk of unnecessary war, raise the chance that we'll win any war we need to be in, and so we have to pursue. We should be pursuing these diplomatic discussions in any circumstance we can to make as much progress as we can.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, live from Washington, D.C., trucking the truth across America. We're with Democratic Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine. He ran, as you know, for vice president with Hillary Clinton in 2016. He's a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and he's up for re-election in 2018. In November, he'll be facing off with Republican newly minted nominee Corey Stewart. Then let's get to legislation that you just put in that would make it illegal for children and parents crossing the border illegally to get split up. A lot of us look at this, Senator, and we get, don't take the kids from the mom and don't split the family up. But it's like, okay, you're coming into the country illegally. You're breaking our law to get here. Other people are following the rules, doing the paperwork, waiting, spending money. You're simply breaking the law. You have a child or children, and you're breaking the law to get here. And now you're looking for legal protections after you're a criminal in the United States, which is your first contact with the U.S. is to become a criminal. And so a lot of people are looking at this and saying, the fact that we are splitting families up is a deterrent to bring your children in. So how do you justify your position here when you're dealing with lawbreakers?
Well, I think first, that's clearly what the administration is trying to do. They're trying to deter this, but I will challenge you on the lawbreaker thing. Many of these families are coming here seeking out U.S. officials and surrendering to them and saying, we want to petition for asylum or refuge. These are not all families that are trying to sneak across and avoid. The unaccompanied minors who come and the parents who come with children are often coming seeking asylum and refuge, which people have thought the U.S. is a place where they could for years, and there's a legal process for that. And so when they're seeking asylum and refuge, and then their kids are being taken away from them, that is what's different about this. And you saw the other day, the Attorney General said, we will no longer allow you to seek asylum or refuge based on violence in your neighborhood or based on domestic violence. That is a dramatic change in U.S. policy. People have been able to seek asylum and refuge in this country. And then there's a process for determining whether or not they get it. But many of these folks are not breaking the law. They're trying to take advantage of a law. They're turning themselves in, and then they're finding that their children are ripped away from them. And I just don't think that's in accord with the family values that we stand for as a country.
Do you think there's some that come and seek asylum that are abusing that particular law that we have, just basically saying, hey, I have violence and therefore I'm seeking asylum? Because the Justice Department and Jeff Sessions is saying that statute we have is widely abused. How do you respond to that?
John, look, you and I are adults and we've seen a lot of life. I think we would both agree that there's not a single statute or rule that somebody hadn't tried to game or end run. However, in the case of these unaccompanied minors, for example, a couple years ago who were coming here from the Northern Triangle, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, it is a fact that they had some of the highest homicide rates in the world. It is a fact that that's largely driven by drug gangs who are, frankly, empowered by cash flowing south from American consumers buying drugs. I lived in Honduras, and I went to the heart of what the U.S. ambassador at the time took us into this neighborhood. He said, I'm taking you to the most dangerous neighborhood, in the most dangerous city, in the most dangerous country in the world. And these are neighborhoods that are dramatically affected by drug violence that's connected to the U.S. drug trade. And these kids, parents don't want to have their kids go elsewhere. I was with the president of Honduras the other day. He says, we don't want to export our young people, but when the circumstances are so bad and the violence is so severe, and a parent has to decide, I'm probably safer making a dangerous multi-thousand-mile trek and surrendering to an American law enforcement border officer than I am living in my own home. That's tough. This is a tough circumstance. We have to have the right rules about asylum and refugee claims, and you're right, if people are trying to game it, hopefully we can determine that, and then they won't be given asylum or refuge. But I don't think we should be just shutting it off and saying that no longer will we entertain even a legitimate claim. This is not shutting down illegitimate claims. The Attorney General has said we will no longer even consider a legitimate claim of you're driven out of your home because of violence or you're driven out of your home because of domestic violence. And that is a huge change in our policy.
All right. I can understand where you're coming from that. I think both of us have a position. There's probably a middle compromise as normal. Let's get to...
Yeah, well, and just on the compromise,
Right.
I mean, I wrote a compromise with my colleagues in February. We gave the president a bill that would have protected Dreamers, but $25 billion for border security, which was exactly the amount of money he asked for. Now, we wanted to have dialogue with him about the way it would be spent, because, you know, the notion of just spending it all on a wall, if you go to the border now, there's some wall, there's some mountains, there's some river, there's some fence, there's some areas where there's none of that. Just to build a wall would make no sense. 40% of the people who are in the country illegally overstay visas. You could build a 1 million-foot wall and it wouldn't affect that.
Right.
But we were willing to, I think the middle ground is we had protection for Dreamers, and we will make that investment in border security. We just want to make sure that it's really spent the right way. And the president said no.
Well, he said no because he's seeking long-term legislative reform to a broken immigration system. And the three tenets he wants exogenous of the wall and border security is an end to chain migration, replacing it with a job skills and economic-based system where rather than bring grandma in or your cousin, third cousin from a fifth marriage in, if we determine we have a need for welders and there's welders in Somalia, they go to the top of the list. Same number, it's the same million.
And the president, you're right, but the president also said, I want to do a deal with Dreamers that will be a permanent solution. They deserve it.
Right.
I want border security. And there was a deadline we were working under, a March 5th deadline. So we said, look, here's two pieces of it. We'll do this. And if you want to have this discussion about, you know, you call it chain migration. We call it family unification. It's been a source of a key pillar of our immigration system forever that has positively affected both the president's family and his wife's family. If you want to look at a way to change that, we'll sit down and work on that too. But let's act right now on this border issue that you and I were talking about, and we can provide border security there. But you know, he said, if I don't get everything, I'm not willing to do something good. We were kind of like, can you take yes for an answer? And the answer to it was no.
Well, because I think he sees this as a one-time opportunity to fix the problem, and he doesn't believe in, you call it family unification, I'm going to call it chain migration. The president doesn't believe in that. He also doesn't believe in the visa lottery system, and he wants to go to an economic-based immigration system, similar to what Canada does. Everybody's now a big fan of Justin Trudeau after, you know, the G7. He's the new liberal icon. Well, he's got the same thing. You just can't come into Canada based on chain migration. You have to be able to prove that you have a job skill and get a job there. And Australia has the same program.
Look, we're willing to have that discussion. But I mean, you know, the president who spoke at the State of the Union and was going after chain migration when his own family benefited by it, when his wife's family benefited by it. And look, you know, in Virginia, John, about 1 out of 9 Virginians was born in another country, and that is dramatically different than it was in 1958 when I was born. It was about 1 out of 100 then. And that growth in the internationalizing the Virginia population has also coincided with a dramatic improvement in our economic fortunes. We were in the bottom quarter per capita income back in the day, and we're in top quarter now. And immigration has been part of it, including family unification. So to just tear it all up or you know say that the whole thing is bad, that's not right. But we can work to find a solution to that.
All right, I've only got a couple more minutes, and I really appreciate the time. We're with Senator Tim Kaine, Democratic senator from Virginia, ran for vice president, as you know, 2016, and he's on the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, a judge just ruled merger, okay, AT&T, Time Warner. Look, I'm a small business owner with a small media company, so big to me is bad. Anything big to me is scary. This thing looks so big. What do your instincts say on this?
I'll tell you, my instincts, John, are with you. I don't believe in too big to fail, and I worry about too big to fail. So when there are things like this merger that just and there's other mergers out there. There's a Sinclair Tribune merger that's out there that's underway that also worries me. I think diverse media voices, just like having a whole lot of places to go to get a loan, you know, having a viable and diverse banking community or a diverse anything makes society better, gives people more choices. And the merger mania in the media field scares me.
Well, I'm totally opposed to this Sinclair Tribune merger. The more you consolidate media companies, and I understand there's pressure on them financially, but being in the business, Senator, and you've dealt with media for a very long time since you ran for city council in Richmond, and before that when you were a civil rights attorney, the tougher it is. And once they get to that size, you've got one voice. I mean, you saw what Sinclair did. They put a memo out to their anchors.
And everybody had to repeat the talking point.
Everybody had
John, when I was lieutenant governor and governor, about 5 or 6 Virginia papers had a Richmond reporter covering state government. Most of them don't anymore. And so, the decline in the media, the mergers, mean less vigorous coverage. And I just think, I'm a believer in you guys, you press guys. I'm not out banging the press all the time. I think the First Amendment, means that it's messy and it's robust and all of that. And I don't always love everything anybody says about me, but I think it's worked pretty well for our country. And, the undermining of the media of the kind that the president tends to do, together with the consolidation of the media that seems to be driven by the economy and regulatory regime, these are things that are not good for the country.
Well, the bottom line is, if you want real news, tune into the John Fredericks Radio Network, Monday to Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., and you can hear great discussions with people like former vice presidential candidate and now Senate candidate and U.S. Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine. More information, timkaine.com. Senator, thanks for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, John, look forward to talking soon. I really appreciate it.
Good luck on the campaign trail.